I'm in Perpignan in a village called Elne in the Pyrenees-Orientales. I started my business. It was in, let's say, I did my first experiments because I discovered the word permaculture in October 2015. Just before that, I was a fishmonger. I had a 12-year career in seafood, even though I did an agricultural baccalaureate. But as you all know, what we learned in agricultural school, we don't end up keeping much of it in the end. So, career change, we launched the business, and we're going to look at that with a few key dates. Let's say that in 2016, we started doing some small experiments on 3,800 square meters. After that, we grew pretty quickly to 5,300 square meters in 2017. And that's when I launched the business. I officially registered in 2017, and today we're at 1.6 hectares, and I think we'll reach 2 hectares by next week. So things are moving along well. We set up 2 stages. In the first stage, we focused on soil regeneration, which we'll talk about in just a moment. And in 2017, we introduced biodynamics because I'm part of the Biodynamie Roussillon Association, and we make biodynamic preparations together, which really brought something extra. We'll talk about that as well, along with agroforestry. 2017 was also when I discovered the Maraîchage Sol Vivant network, which I didn't know about at all before. And that was kind of a revelation where everything started to make sense and everything sped up because, as Vincent mentioned earlier, the YouTube channel really gave things a boost. So it allows us to shed light on our technical production methods and brings us much more agronomic knowledge and above all, a better understanding of living systems. So yes, there you have it, 2017, the start of the activity. To start to bring the soil back to life, I didn't really overthink it. There's a waste disposal site right across from the river, which has an abundance of wood chips available to us. Just to give you an idea, it used to be free until last year, and now we pay the modest sum of 50 euros for 13 tons of wood chips delivered. So that's a bit of luck we have here in Perpignan. And actually soon, as soon as we've properly organized the network, it will be free. So that'll be even better. Right after that, what we did, I'll tell you a bit about the technical methods we used to restore and revive the soil on the 1 hectare plot. We incorporated about 50 tons of shredded material into the soil with a disc and also added manure. And we directly sowed a cover crop. So that was in November 2017. So we used 2 techniques. Later on, for the cover crop, it was a mix of legumes and grasses. We carefully selected and incorporated fava beans, more specifically field beans, which are a robust and nutritious legume, along with grass pea, another valuable and resilient pulse crop. Now I remember. We also included vetch, particularly hairy vetch, known for its excellent soil-enriching properties. And for the cereal grasses, we cultivated both wheat, a staple grain, and rye, which is highly adaptable and provides good ground cover. We made a small mix like that. It worked well, it came up nicely. We got a nice amount of biomass produced. The first year we didn't use a roller crimper simply because I started out with just 200 euros in my pocket, so it was pretty tough. I didn't have much money or anything. We relied on neighbors who had sheep. It was really interesting because it was the sheep that flattened the cover crop for us. The advantage of that too is a bit like what biodynamic farmers say. It's about bringing animals into the system. And so, thanks to the droppings and the urine, we were also able to introduce ferments into the system, and that paid off from the very first year. That was the soil regeneration phase. This is the small cover crop you can see that we put in place. Then we arrived at a fairly simple process. It involved covering the soil. We added more mulch and then planted using silage tarps that we buy from the agricultural supply center. Because around here, we're not really a livestock area. So getting used silage tarps was a bit complicated, but we bought them new. Then we moved on to technical production methods, one of which was for small seeds. That one is quite simple. What's interesting, for example, this year we did it was around August 13th, we set up 1,000 square meters using the small seed method with carrots, black radishes, and turnips. So there, we brought in about 5 to 10 centimeters of mulch. We pushed the mulch aside with a small manual debris remover. We got right down to the soil level. We put down compost that we also get from the waste collection center, which is very well made, but you always have to check how fine the compost is, because here in the summer, it gets really hot. And if the compost isn't fine enough, it dries out a lot, and then you have problems with germination afterwards. That's what happened to me at the beginning of spring when hardly anything sprouted. So this time, by really choosing a good compost, we were able to sow and had great success. And so what's really interesting is that we were able to cover the soil really well, and we hardly have any weeding to do. That is to say, out of the 1,000 square meters of small seeds, we only weeded around 2 trees. And today, if you come to the garden, you'll see there are 6 mallows that have come up. I took some photos. They're on my Facebook page. I'll show you that in a bit. And that's what's interesting. It's that we don't spend our lives weeding all of this. That's quite an exceptional time saver. As a result, things sprout really well afterwards, and we end up producing some really beautiful carrots. Just so you know, I have 2 types of soil. We have 4 plots that are a bit spread out. We have one soil, we call it the beach, it's sand, and there's another one that's a bit heavier, a bit more silty. In both cases anyway, they're still fairly light soils, they're alluvial plain soils. Things grow very well and the carrots develop really nicely. So that's interesting. Then another method is the plug planting method. Here, it's always the very same fundamental principle, diligently adding a generous layer of mulch. This primary beneficial green manure, crucial for the vital soil regeneration phase, as I previously mentioned, originally commenced in October or November of 2017 and subsequently concluded in June of 2018. And now for the past 2 years, we've only been adding material on top. We're making fairly substantial additions because on the hectare, we've put down about 250 tons of mulch up to now, since November 2017. The reason I'm also applying such large amounts of mulch, it can go up to 10 or even 20 centimeters on the potato rotation, is simply because a very, very high level of biological activity has started up. Here, our earthworms are active 24/7, 365 days a year. Because it's warm, there's no break, so naturally, the mulch decomposes very quickly, and we have to compensate with substantial additions. So often it's true that when we plant the mini clods, we usually place them right at the level of the leaf. You can see this, especially in the photo on the left, where that's a cabbage crop. What I do is alternate 1 cabbage, 1 lettuce, 1 cabbage, 1 lettuce, and I also play with the growth time, which allows me to optimize production per square meter. In the greenhouse, we do the same thing. We try to optimize as much as possible by, for example, on the right side of the bed, being on the north side. So there, I might put more of the celery and Swiss chard, and then use the south side for the lettuces. And so, over time, the Swiss chard and celery get bigger and bigger, and we've already harvested the lettuces. So that's always to optimize and to be able to produce more per square meter. We also tried, in the case of cabbage and lettuce, broadcasting radish seeds underneath. That worked really well. The radish manages to push through the mulch, even when it's quite thick. But then, when it came to harvesting and all that, it was a bit of a hassle. And since we started to expand, we couldn't really afford to waste time making bunches of radishes anymore. So we switched to harvesting large vegetables and stopped worrying about it. Small radishes, all those little vegetables, I don't really like them. It's a waste of time. Now, just to talk a bit about the potato growing method, we've done it in several ways. We've done it under hay, because I have a colleague who brings me bales of rotten hay from time to time, and it really helps out. We do it under tarps, and we do it under wood chips. I'll start by talking about the middle picture, the one with the wood chips. I think it's good to include potatoes as part of a soil regeneration phase and to make massive additions, because we incorporate about 20 centimeters of wood chips over the potatoes. The potatoes are simply placed on the ground. We did this on BA du Roussillon last year. We got very nice sizes and perfectly healthy potatoes. What we do is we usually harvest it in June after having planted it in February. And since in June we still have a thick layer of wood chips and the soil is digesting well and things are going smoothly, we follow up with another demanding crop, sweet potatoes. I plant the sweet potatoes and there's still about 10 to 15 centimeters of wood chips left. But just to tell you, this year, as of today, if you go to the area where we harvested the sweet potatoes, there's no more wood chips left. So 20 centimeters have been broken down in less than a year. It goes super fast. The soil is responding. What's good is that, as a result, fertility increases quickly. But managing this in the Mediterranean climate is really very unique. We're really getting close to tropical cycles. When I see my esteemed colleagues in Normandy telling me that their organic mulch lasts for more than an entire year, sometimes it genuinely makes me want to seriously consider moving to the beautiful region of Normandy, especially since the wood chips, this particular time, were meticulously spread by a sturdy wheelbarrow, a truly laborious and time-consuming process. You should know that during the soil regeneration phase, we used a spreader with a colleague's tractor. The spreader broke down. So I took out the wheelbarrows and I only fixed it just last week. So that means that the 250 tons that were put in the garden, everything was done by wheelbarrow. And so the human factor also came into play in this activity, which was really important. We'll talk about it. There's an AMAP supporting me, and they're fully committed because for them, it makes sense to eat vegetables grown in living soil and to start a local movement where this farm is highlighted. And we're also trying to change things through this approach. As for growing under tarps, that's interesting. So beforehand, we plant a cover crop that we either roll or mow down. Then we lay down the silage tarp, which we perforate every 30 centimeters, and we plant a potato in each hole. We do this with a planting stick, as you can see. What's interesting here is that you just insert the potato a few centimeters into the soil using varieties like Mona Lisa and so on. The potato will produce its tubers just above its planting hole, which means right under the top. And as you can see, it works really well. Right before that, as you can see, we close up the planting hole with some fresh manure. So I do this also because it helps add some weight, since you should know that in Perpignan, we have a wind called the tramontane, which is really a headache and makes the tarps and everything move around a lot. And so sometimes it can even completely scalp your potato plant. So that's the problem. So here, what we did, you can't really see it well, but there are a lot of iron bars. I also put in some old greenhouse hoops that I don't use anymore. Basically, there's a lot of weight. The tramontane wind, for those of you in the south, you really have to take it into account because it can be really problematic, especially here in the north. So the tramontane is mostly northwest, and you really have to be careful when you get tramontane winds in February or March with temperatures around 1 degree in the morning, and if it blows at 110, 120 km/h, it can burn your entire crop. So here, you absolutely have to, we've started planting hedges, you really need to protect. Tramontane, a major factor to take into account. And as a result, you get potatoes of good size, healthy ones, which is interesting. And the advantage of this technique is that it's easy at harvest time. With this, we're not going to disrupt the soil deeply. So that's really cool. So I like to have a fairly level soil to move on to other crops. And in this case, after my potato crop, I ran a light pass with a vibro cultivator to level everything out, just very lightly, about 3 or 4 centimeters deep, but it was necessary to flatten everything. And then I moved on to a carrot rotation, which is interesting. The advantage of this is that when you remove your tarp, the area will be really well weeded. You'll have a perfectly clean soil. So the results are a great level of biological activity because, as I said, it's capable of breaking down 20 centimeters of mulch in a year. So it didn't take 100 years to come back. You should know that it's hot. We have water here in Perpignan. It doesn't rain often, but we have irrigation and pressurized water coming down from the mountains. And so that's interesting. So it really boosts biological activity. The organic matter content increased very quickly. And you can also see it in the size of the vegetables, and we'll see that in a moment. I'm quite proud of this profession, especially regarding the plant cover and the materials and carbon we're able to sequester. Because given the problems of climate change and all that, I think this is really the kind of agriculture we need to promote in the coming years because it's urgent. The plants are healthier, that's for sure. You can see I don't even know about diseases actually. People have told me, look, you've got this, you've got that, you've got this disease. I don't know them and I've never really focused on diseases. So there aren't too many problems. What I've noticed is that we've had a big return of biodiversity, whether it's birds or amphibians. This year we've had a large number of amphibians come onto the farm. What's interesting is that they're of all sizes, all species, and so that's really interesting. And there are birds hovering in place during the summer, like swallows and bats. We really have a lot of these types of birds sweeping across the farm, and according to a local ornithologist, a pair of swallows eats about 1 million insects each summer. So I can tell you that's quite a bit of cleaning up. And so as a result, we ended up with fewer caterpillars on the cabbages during the summer, for example. We had 4 or 5 times fewer. It was incredible. We also have quite a few, well, we set up an apiary. That's interesting, the apiary, especially for zucchini at the start of the season in the greenhouse. We had an issue this year, which was that we had really beautiful zucchini plants in the greenhouse. The plants looked amazing, but the zucchinis weren't developing, so there was a pollinator problem. I think it was just too early in the season, so the wild bees hadn't come out yet. We put a beehive in front of the tunnel, and the following week we harvested 100 kilos of zucchini. So it happened really fast. So it was important, right there in the middle. That's what we did last week with, well, I also host school students, and they're the ones who made the bat houses. So we're going to try to attract some colonies and keep them on the farm. And that would be cool. We have blobs, for those who know about them. It's a unicellular organism that eats fungus and releases minerals. That's interesting. It really spreads well throughout the garden. It's very interesting. And well, earthworms, well, they're here, they're present and everywhere, and that's great. So, as I was saying earlier, we're increasing productivity per square meter. I think that's really thanks to our soils, which are very, very well mycorrhized. And we've noticed that several times when looking at soil profiles during, you can really see filaments everywhere, inside and outside, on the mulch and all that. So that really allows us to intensify, to really pack the crops in. And as a result, there's enough food for everyone, and that's interesting. There's not much weed growth because we plant so densely, and actually my footpaths are only 30 centimeters wide. So it's true that sometimes you have to squeeze in like this. I'm really not bothered by it. Even with the weeds, not even on the footpaths, everything is covered. We put mulch everywhere. Like I said, we have plenty of it, so we use it. And that's really great having this material available and at a low cost, because every year it's maybe not even 1,000 euros worth of mulch for the whole farm, considering what it brings. And here, this was a bit of humor I used during a presentation. I reused that same presentation. The point is, we have healthy plants. We produce a lot. Today, the farm delivers about 90 baskets per week. We make 48 deliveries out of 52 weeks in the year. There were restaurants, and we also work with a few wholesalers who top up their baskets afterwards. So that makes a weekly equivalent of 100 to 110 baskets. So that's not bad. And we still haven't managed to optimize things yet, because right now we're in a phase of mechanizing the farm. Because, and I agree with Guillaume here, it's really exhausting when you do everything by hand. So I said in 2020, as a good resolution, we're going to mechanize intelligently, of course. So we're going to use fossil energy wisely for tasks like shredding, but also for planting. Because starting in August, when we begin planting batches of cabbages and all that, it really starts to add up. And especially when you plant here in the summer, by 10 a.m., it's already 30 degrees. So it's really, really hot outside today. The vegetables are big. That's great for the AMAP members, because I tell them, for a small vegetable like this, you might as well have a big one, since they often get vegetables by the piece, so they come out ahead. And we really have no problem growing large vegetables because the soil responds, we have the organic matter, and we give the plants what they need. And big and healthy, and that's interesting. The second thing is, it's incredibly tasty. And the flavor is truly exceptional, recognized by the top chefs in the region. I mainly work with a top chef from the area who's really well known. It's the restaurant La Bartave in Argelès-sur-Mer. And he won't change his vegetable supplier. And in fact, on his menu at the bottom, it says that the vegetables come from André Trives' garden. That settles it. It puts everyone on the same page. So I think it's nutritious. Also, as Guillaume mentioned earlier, we use the right varieties. We really focus on Catalan and local varieties. In particular, this year, for example, we developed a lettuce called the Ancien Miard. Excuse me, I also speak a bit of Catalan, but it's a romaine, a large romaine lettuce that hadn't been cultivated again for over 30 years. Last year, we received seeds that came from the Terre del Savis Conservatory. By the way, I'd like to give them a shout out. So we redeveloped that seed. As a result, we have a lettuce that's truly suited to our region and is really exceptional in terms of taste. That's what we are working on. We've also established a partnership with a seed producer called Refardes, located above Sabadell in Barcelona, who also has many local varieties. So we're bringing Catalan varieties from the south up to the north. We're very, very proud to bring a bit of local character back into all this, because after all, it's a terroir, and a terroir needs to be maintained. So after 3 years, the goal for the farm is to go from 3,800 square meters to 1.6 hectares. A bit later in the workshops as well, we'll talk a bit about this growth. I want to make that clear. For me, it was a career change. I was completely out on the street. I had $200 in my pocket when I started. And today, by this summer, we will have invested almost 80,000 euros in the farm, self-financed, without going through the banks. So that's definitely something to be proud of. We worked hard, we went for it, and it's not going to stop. And what's interesting is that it's exponential, so the adventure continues. And that's really interesting. Why? You might ask me, why do you call your farm permaculture as well? I think that the concept of design in permaculture, if it's well introduced, if it's well structured, that's extremely important. Above all, it's about designing your life, knowing what you want, setting goals, and then, from that, your farm and all the human dynamics that come with it, like the AMAP, the permaculture festival we organize on the land every year, which welcomes 3,000 people, follow. There are human initiatives, and that's really interesting. Modernizing, as I was saying, developing the range of products. We planted an orchard, and this year we planted citrus trees. I'm trying agroforestry with citrus in Perpignan, mandarins, lemons, oranges. We'll see how it turns out. Aromatics and exotic products. Those are just little whims. We have meticulously set up a spacious chapel greenhouse, so you will find the sturdy posts positioned precisely between each individual chapel structure. And here, the idea would be to grow passion fruit. We're going to try to set that up. We've already planted on the north side of the chapel some citrus varieties like finger limes, Guadeloupe limes, and so on. It's going really well, they're producing. That's kind of my thing, but it's always good to have these little passions because they keep us motivated every day. Strengthen cooperation. For those who are interested, we have a Mediterranean network that's currently being organized for anyone who wants to join, because the soil and climate conditions from the Valencia region in Spain to Monaco are pretty similar. The idea would be to set this up, so anyone interested in joining this initiative, we can meet later and start getting this dynamic going. I also work with Tunisians. On Sunday, I'm going to Tunisia to train some people on MSV. They also have very specific contexts with water issues, with major problems, but there are similarities. For example, in our region, in the Pyrenees Oriental, due to poor agricultural practices, we're starting to see saline intrusion in the Salanque. In Tunisia, on the other hand, they're already overwhelmed by this issue. Maybe there's an opportunity to share experiences and find solutions together and to build a network to prevent problems in the future. That could be interesting. Sharing knowledge is what we try to do every day, and it's actually quite exciting. My AMAP is called PermaAMAP 66, and it has a Facebook page. If you want to see how we energize the small actions we do together. For example, we're going to build the AMAP's premises next week, or in about 15 days, I can't remember exactly, but it will be made entirely of earth and straw. We're bringing in someone who specializes in that. It's all about sharing knowledge. It's not just agricultural knowledge, it's also about knowing how to build your own house, which is just as important. Instead of going to buy cement, we'll use earth and straw, maybe that's even better. There are lots of little things like that. This AMAP and the people involved are truly exceptional. I want to give them a shout out. And thank you for your attention.